Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kalina from Business Review, and I will be your host today. It is our pleasure to have Infosys with us today, who will be presenting this webinar titled Building a Network of the Future Through 5G and Edge. Today's guest speakers are Nitesh Bansal, Senior Vice President and Global Head Engineering Services at Infosys, Dustin Geho, Service Director, Asia Pacific Global Data, Domenico Convertino, VP Product Strategy and Lifecycle Management, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, Campbell Fraser, Head of IT and Networks, Spark New Zealand, and Anand Swamithan, EVP and Global Industry Leader, Communications, Media and Technology at Infosys. I would like to welcome you to our webinar platform on 24. You will notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email to rejoin the session. In order to ask any questions, you can send them in via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of your screen and click submit. We will allocate some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. Please use the yellow help widget if you require any assistance, and you can also move, resize, and maximize any of the windows in front of you in order to get a better view of the slides. But now, please allow me to welcome Nitesh. Nitesh, over to you now.
All right, thank you, Kalina, and sorry about that technical glitch. I know it's early morning in Asia, it's afternoon in the Pacific, and late evening in Europe. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping safe and enjoying this virtual webinar on building the networks of future with 5G and Edge from the comforts of your home. I'm sure Kalina introduced me. I'm Nitesh Bansal. I'm the Senior Vice President with Infosys. I also head the engineering services, where we are working with some of the top organizations in the world across network equipment, the networks themselves, software and tools, to enable this massive disruption and disaggregation which is happening in the network space, and to help those companies adopt more digital technologies in this physical world. We of course work across the ecosystem of other mechanical, electronic, and electrical products as well. But talking about the products and the engineering world around us, we are living in a time when there is a massive disruption going on, triggered by a set of technologies that have become pervasive and have unleashed this massive amount of innovation into the world, perhaps beginning 5 years, 6 years ago. And it has completely transformed their entire product and engineering ecosystem. These set of technologies that we would commonly know as IoT, we would know as a set of technologies relating to big data, the pervasive cloud, and of course, underlying all of that is connectivity. Connectivity, which, if all of you would remember, I'm sure you would, not so long ago, less than 15 years ago, just getting a roaming Wi-Fi connectivity. Sorry, I'm getting echo. So just getting Wi-Fi connectivity roaming used to be a big deal, and it was quite expensive as well. But today, it's become ever-present. We all are connected all the time. Whether we are on a ship in the middle of an ocean or we are doing a transatlantic flight, we are able to work throughout. We, in fact, are consuming new products and services also remotely through platforms because of this pervasive connectivity. Education, entertainment, all has become virtual and connected. And even the essential services are going down the same path, where they are progressing towards similar connected capabilities and patterns. And as the bandwidth and the speed of connectivity have increased through the 4G, LTE, 5G kind of ecosystems, so have the data processing and consumption requirements have grown along with them. From a few bytes with connected sensors to now millions of connected devices, and that too including entire 4K streaming live video inputs that need to be processed in real time and insights being drawn from them. All this would not have been possible a few years ago. But now, with the edge infrastructure coming in place and computing power moving to the edge, we are able to imagine all those kind of use cases and take advantage of it. As a result, we are today innovating at breakneck speed and continuously delivering new human experiences. All this can be a little bit confusing, overwhelming with all the mumbo jumbo of 5G and edge and all the other technical jargon that comes along. But to demystify that, I have my excellent set of panelists today to help us navigate through it and share their insights as to what all of this really means. Where are we going in this world of 5G and edge? How is it shaping up new set of opportunities? And how are the companies around the world readying themselves to take advantage of this opportunity? As Kalina would have introduced, we have with us Campbell Fraser, we have Domenico Convertino, we've got Dustin, as well as Anand Swaminathan, who would be sharing these insights with us. So without much ado, let me first begin with Dustin from Global Data Research to provide us some base understanding of these terms. What is 5G? What is edge? To level set our understanding as to how these technologies are playing a role, and also share some insights into the latest research and the data that they've got from the research they've conducted. So over to you, Dustin.
Hey, thank you so much, Nitesh, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Dustin Kehoe. My firm is Global Data, and I'm going to walk you through network. I'm very passionate about networks, 5G and edge. I think edge is going to be more transformative. I hope to convey that message to you than cloud in the last 10 years. But what is edge? Let's just cut to the chase and talk about it. Edge compute is just a different way of bringing the power of centralized data centers that we've known, maybe it's the public cloud, closer to the user. And that basically gives you the ability to put storage, compute, and network on top of or close to the workload to drive other things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and IoT. And all of them, in our view, kind of mesh together. But there's other examples. For example, I'm working with a telco in the Middle East that is looking at edge as a way to change the way they deliver media to their customers. Think of content distribution networks. We no longer have to send out trucks and big crews to cover live sporting events. We can do it with smaller teams, port it to a remote cloud location through edge technology, and get information out quicker to the end user. So that's changing that business. But edge is also deployed in different options. For example, you can have a server, you get edge server. You can have it deployed through gateways. You can have it through switching and routing, operational technology, many different ways, also many different environments. You can put it in mining, ships, container ships, places with noise, humidity, vibration, dust. It's very ruggedized. And the other thing that's interesting about edge is you can possibly connect it in your on-site facility, but you're also looking at street-side cabinets. So instead of a 100 megawatt data center that powers 1% of New York, you're looking at your local street-side cabinet to bring edge closer to wherever it's being used. So telcos, you'll hear, is going to have a really interesting role. And the other thing is hyperscalers. Hyperscalers like AWS and Azure are coming and partnering with telco. They're putting their top of route switching and infrastructure into the telco cloud. They're reducing latency, and they're constructing with the telcos lossless networks. I'm talking about 10 to the power of 7 in packet delivery. That is amazing, and that is only possible through edge. So where does 5G fit in this? Let's talk about it. Edge gives you the real-time response, the low latency, ultra-low latency in applications. It gives you cost savings because instead of backhauling all the way to Aran or something, you can actually do it in your location, in your proximity. It gives you the ability to work offline. You don't always need to be connected to the cloud. I met a whole roundtable of execs in Western Australia, in Perth, and they're very excited about the single use case. It can give you enhanced security and governance. Think of data sovereignty. That comes up all the time. Edge can do caching and compression. So that solves for data optimization. But then 5G gives you the low latency, the high performance, the throughput, the capacity, the ability through machine-type communications to support dense environments. We're talking millions of objects, things, and connected sensors within a single cell. You're going to see things like new use cases, the driverless vehicles, the remote surgery, but also other things like segmented bandwidth that network slicing gives you the opportunity to do, which is a 5G standard forthcoming. So generally, when you sort of look at this, you're looking at milliseconds all the way from maybe something in the 100 millisecond range to the 10 millisecond range. All of these have different property characteristics. It determines where you're going to put edge and everything else to that effect. So, you're going to see it in IoT, you're going to see it in facial recognition, and then it gets really exciting when you get into maybe autonomous, driverless drone taxis that actually carry people. Or you're doing remote surgery, in this case of China, over 1,000 kilometers away. So it also gives you some business outcomes like ability to do localized decisions, densification, like what we talked about, and there's lots around security, resiliency, and the business continuity, especially in current times with the health crisis, how we back up, store, manage, archive, and retrieve data. All of this is really important, as well as keeping compliant with data sovereignty. So in many ways, this injects a lot of newness into the oldness of cloud. So we looked at some market sizing. I'll just walk you through this. We do market sizing of global data. We see some of the fast-moving, fast-growing sectors. While there's a good distribution across all sectors, it's good. But manufacturing, Industry 4.0 is one of the key areas. But I'm also talking to some banks who are looking at the technology in places like Australia to talk about the future of banking. For example, using technology to deliver an immersive customer experience when they walk into a location. Branch in the box, open banking for the enablement of fintechs, video conferencing through ordinary ATM machines, kind of enhancing them a little bit, and just so much more. So what is the outlook for Edge? And I'll share with you just some thoughts on it. Excuse me. So last slide. Edge means basically for us that cloud is not defined by distance anymore. It's actually functionality. And I think one of the things that's going to happen is Edge is going to converge with carrier network function virtualization. What does that mean? So when a carrier gives you, for example, firewalls, routers, load balancing, application acceleration, this is going to be done through an Edge device, making it a lot simpler. This is important now because branch transformation is huge with the current health crisis. We're going to be working remote. We're going to be distributed workers, as we all are today. Many of us are today. And so we got to rethink what we do about the branch. But Edge is going to drive transformation within data centers. When I talked about the street-side cabinets, that's where the transformation could begin. Telcos have an interesting role to play here because they've standardized data centers on DC. The other data centers are standardized on AC. So there's a massive retrofit, but also new opportunities, new business models that we've identified. And once you get this right, in 2025, 25 billion IoT devices, you get those amazing use cases like remote surgery and haptic computing and internet that you can touch and interact with and engage and sensory response. It's going to be very transformative in ways we have not imagined. So without further ado, that's Edge in a nutshell. I would like to pass it back on to the host and to the panelists, and please ask us questions at the end, and we look for a good, vibrant discussion over the next 45 minutes.
Thank you, Dustin. Wow, I mean that's quite a lot to take in a nutshell. Cloud is not going to be defined by distance. Edge could be placed in the cabinets next door, and AC data centers versus DC, and of course, underscoring all of this with security, resilience, data governance. That was amazing. At that point, let me start off with my first panelist, with Campbell. And Campbell, Dustin in his presentations talked about so many opportunities. He has referred to how the network operators will have a very special role to play, and a lot can be determined by what role the network operators would play. You at Spark New Zealand, you are the largest network operator in New Zealand. And of course, you're seeing that entire market. I would like to understand from you how you are seeing that market and the opportunity develop for you with Edge. What is it that you're doing to kind of be ready for it, to take advantage of it? And also, knowing how New Zealand has this very deep connection with sports, is there anything special you're doing in that sector or any other sector? So, Campbell, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nitish, and also Dustin for taking us through that introduction. It was really good. I think that 5G in New Zealand is something that we've already started to roll out, but I think it's fair to say, and Dustin's slides highlight this, that it's quite a long journey to get to some of the areas that the use cases would represent. And by that, I mean, when we start the 5G rollout, what we are essentially looking at is utilizing it as an enhancement to our existing fixed wireless access capability. So providing fast broadband capability where we don't have fixed capability to be able to deliver that. There are a number of other use cases that we're exploring, and those, it's certainly initially a lot of those are B2B use cases rather than B2C. I think it's fair to say 4G was much more of a B2C play than 5G will potentially be. And also on sport, as most people will know, New Zealand is very big on rugby and also cricket. And we actually at Spark created a streaming sporting platform for the Rugby World Cup, which was particularly successful last year. So we're looking at ways that we can potentially use 5G and some 5G use cases, particularly in stadiums, where being able to provide live playback to mobile handsets and maybe also some sort of VR AR for mobile handsets as part of the overall experience within those stadiums. So look, it's really, really exciting. There are lots of potential use cases. I think the challenge is always how you monetize it, and probably the one highlight is that for 5G, we've spent a lot more time as a telco looking at that than we certainly did in 4G. Hopefully that answers your question, Nitish.
Thank you, Campbell. No, that's really amazing. And the Rugby World Cup, and I'm hoping that with America's Cup coming back to New Zealand next year, perhaps the preparations for that are starting off, and we're probably going to see some amazing live playbacks on America's Cup as well. Thank you so much for that. Moving to Domenico, and Domenico, while Dustin talked about the role of network operators, the role of OEMs is no less important. And HPE has, of course, a name and is known for being an enterprise infrastructure provider. So you certainly would have a role in providing the edge hardware. But what I believe is you're playing much beyond that. So would you please elaborate as to what role are you seeing for providers like HPE in this ecosystem of Edge and 5G, and how are you capitalizing on the same?
Good question. Thanks, Nitish, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So, I mean, as HPE, as you said, so the company strategy is as an extreme on what is happening at because the action is really happening at the edge, and more the data are generating and are going to be consumed exactly at the edge. So we invested a lot to increase our portfolio, our offering, to better manage these different type of demand and enable new different type of communication and different type of application that have exact average as much as possible the amount of it that is made able at the edge. So, and when you look at 5G, there is another of the HP DNA that is coming out that is not just the leading enterprise IT infrastructure company, but we are even a company that has a strong telco background. We have been in this industry for more than 30 years now, and we have quite a comprehensive portfolio of software that is going to address the 5G challenges in terms of cloud native core and in terms even of operation automation. Right. I want to mention here because are extremely important, and probably we will go back this topic later in our conversation. Right. So if we want to really roll out all the potential of 5G as technology, we need to look at standalone deployment 5G. So we need to look at not only a radio access network that is 5, but is even to a radio access that is baked of, but is baked a 5G native core, and the native core has to be cloud native, has to be extremely innovative in terms of software architecture compared to what we are used in the telecommunication industry, in order to give all these capabilities that have been mentioned so far. So when we are about slice management, when we are speaking about slicing hand-to-hand in the network, this is something that clearly can be enabled only by a standalone core. So if you look at this from a different perspective, we are a world where connectivity will not be pretty much focused on humans as it has been in the past. But we are entering in a world that is completely connected. This world that is completely connected requires to the telco to have much more flexibility in the way they are bringing connectivity on the territory. This type of density can be achieved disaggregating all the infrastructure from all the software layers to have scalability. All these things may sound familiar to people who have an IT background because it's pretty much what has been happening in the enterprise IT world at the time of the cloudification, right? When the cloud became a reality, this has been exactly the type of disaggregation that has been enjoyed in the enterprise IT world. So we believe that a company like us that has this DNA in IT enterprise, a company knows cloud very well, and a company that has history in telco is well set to deliver products that will facilitate such a disruption. But here we are entering, if you allow me another 30 seconds, into another interesting part of the story. The part is that there is not a company that can fulfill the full stack here. So the concept of ecosystem in 5G in edge is extremely true. So here we need all together the ability to create ecosystem, to attract developers, to provide the right coverage in terms of services across different territories and countries in order to have the final benefit for our society, right? So because we can even have wonderful technology, wonderful connectivity, but if we don't have software that is using such a technology to deliver value to the society, to the business, then the technology is not really creating any difference.
Wow, well said, Domenico. And I think in the world of disaggregated network with a software core, 5G core, and the Aran solution running on it, clearly there is a need of everyone to come together in the ecosystem. And I think that's a great segue for my question to Anand. Anand, you lead the global communications, media, telecom business for Infosys, and with this, all these opportunities being talked about, with the disaggregation that Domenico touched upon, how are you seeing the opportunities shape up? What are your clients asking you for, and what is it that you're doing to be ready for it?
Absolutely, Nitesh. I just want to make sure that I'm audible.
Yes, Anand.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Nitesh, from a client perspective, I think, Infosys' strength has been to work with our clients pretty closely and understand the business needs. And the compulsion for them is, how do they solve some of their core business challenges using edge or 5G, or for that matter, any other technology. And I would, start with an example of where we solved a real-life problem. This was a company that is a leader in wind energy. They operate in 90 countries. They have windmills both onshore and offshore. The problem statement they approached us with a couple of years ago was, how do I increase my yield from these turbines? Because they had sometimes the wind directions changing that required some change in setup. Similarly, there were also failures in some wind turbines because you had to predict what you had to do in terms of preventive maintenance and so on. Now, in solving for the problem, the business problem here, which is about increasing the yield on these wind turbines, both on-site or offshore, we came up with a solution that we needed to create a mini cloud sort of things. The word for that is now edge compute. But as an organization that was solving a business problem, we brought together an ecosystem of players. Domenico referred to the ecosystem of players. We were in fact here partnering with HPE as well, and solved for this client by putting an edge infrastructure that reduced the latency in identifying the problem, whether it was a failure that was developing in a turbine, or proactively shifting the setup changes that were required to take full advantage of the change in wind directions and other variables that enable them to increase the yield. Now, this we did in basically 2 different continents by putting edge infrastructure, by coming together with a variety of our partners. So to your question, what I am seeing with our clients is now, while it was in the initial stages of testing out and so on, now thanks to the pandemic, in an ironic way, the interest to do this even more seriously has actually accelerated. And we are working with on the one side with all the clients across different industries, because that's where the problems are to be solved. But also we are working very closely with the telco operators and hyperscalers and different companies, including companies that are involved in semiconductor technology to map technologies, to actually bring together the total solution that we need to solve the problem. So that's sort of the backdrop I would give in terms of what we are seeing in the market.
Amazing, and that example was really brought the message home. But just as a follow-up, Anand, I know you'd announced a 5G lab ecosystem about 2 years ago, creating 5G labs across the world in various locations. And the messaging was how those labs are helping both the network operators as well as the enterprises discover new set of use cases on how to use technology around 5G and edge. As the 2 years have passed, has that narrative changed? Are there different priorities? Are you seeing some sectors or some needs become more priority or move faster than the others?
No, absolutely. I think, Nitesh, that effort that was brought to bear 2 years ago, with a pioneering vision from your team in terms of setting up the 5G labs and demonstrating the technical viability of how to really have a full 5G stack solution helped us to do a couple of things. One, demonstrate the power of 5G. The best example I would give there is the partnership that we created with Tennis Australia, where someone can actually experience of actually being in person in a live sporting event. It could be a tennis match or a cricket match. And not only that, they can actually get experiences beyond what one can experience by being there in person. like, for example, they could choose, the angle from which they want to watch the match. They could, pick any seat in the stadium. They can order, merchandise if they find something interesting of what a player is wearing. So there are many things that we actually showed that was possible using 5G. Now, this was what the 5G labs did for us. This is one example of what we did in this sector, in the sporting sector. But similarly, there are clients who are interested in checking out what is possible in retail. How can 5G help in retail use cases or insurance and manufacturing and so on. Now, what we have since then done is actually take this concept more closer to the clients because, like what Dustin was mentioning earlier, now the game is about how do you use both connectivity, compute, and storage in a combination to actually deliver on the competitive advantage. If you see, most of the systems integrators have done a reasonable job in terms of the compute and storage capability because of cloud and hyperscalers. But I think what we have done is actually tap into the early advantage we had in building up these 5G technologies and combine them under one roof, which we are calling as the Center for Advanced Connectivity and Compute, and therefore offer a total solution to our customers across these verticals. So I think we are pretty excited about what we can do with these technologies for our end customers. And that's where I think there is a lot of excitement about, where this can take us. And as I said, the pandemic in a very interesting way is actually accelerating these, solutions from proof of concepts to programs.
Brilliant. Now, thanks, Anand. Thanks for that. Domenico, coming back to you, and you touched upon something when you were explaining how this whole ecosystem, while getting disaggregated, is also becoming more complex and has more number of players into it. Now, competing with hyperscalers is nothing new for HPE. You've been obviously competing with them for quite some time. They have been getting into the telecom side of the world. I mean, we saw acquisitions take place. Microsoft invested in Metaswitch and in Affirmed. They have also announced Azure-based 5G core solution, et cetera, et cetera. As you see this thing span out, how do you think the roles of the hyperscalers, the network operators, OEMs, and OEMs again from a traditional sense like the Nokia and Ericssons of the world, and also what OEMs like you will bring to the forefront, how will these roles kind of converge, and how do the enterprises, the businesses who are going to decide to use Edge and 5G, how do they differentiate as to what capabilities they need to use from what? How do they bring it together?
This is a good question. So, I mean, one point is very important that is coming out of this discussion is that we are speaking about the technologies that can really disrupt our society, can disrupt the way we are doing business, are disrupting the way we live and the way we interact with other humans, right? So we cannot consider that this is just a connectivity play that, for example, can be consumed by telco only. And on the other side, it's normal that there will be interest on the hyper to enter into this potential market and find the best usage possible of such technology, right? So that's why there's so much interest, because it's not, if 5G is not another G. It's not after 4 we have 5, and probably in the future we will have. There are fundamental differences that are, again, enabling new potential application, new potential use cases that are disruptive, right? So this is the point. So now, how HPE is entering into this opportunity is, again, we have a couple of partnership, right? So we are used by DNA of the company to partner and cooperate with other companies, right? Many the companies that you mentioned hyperscalers, you mentioned some of the OEM, but I would say even if you look at the telco, right, all these companies have a culture to provide and take care of the stack of a historically, they want to have the full control on the end-to-end, right? So we need to understand that this is probably not going to be the future landscape, right? So I'm insisting too much onto this ecosystem concept, but this is really what is going to win in the market. Who will be able to create the right business value for the entire ecosystem, will create the sustainability for the new services, for the new solutions, and will give to enterprise, to consumers, the possibility to get benefit of the technology. And that's very strong, So we are used to partners. This is an area. So you were mentioning hyperscaler before the Azure. And also the other day, we are part of the Azure program for Telco. So we are even partnering with them. I'm here because I strongly value our partnership with Infosys. Exactly, the way is to create the right ecosystem and to build solutions that may really deliver value to enterprises and to people.
Oh, great. And I think with the ecosystem play comes more cooperation rather than just pure competition. And I think that gets underscored by how this world and how the ecosystem is moving towards it. Campbell, coming back to you, during your answer, you touched upon monetization. And of course, with all the opportunities that we see and the various roles that various players are going to play, including the part of cooperation that just came out, how do you really monetize on this opportunity? Because end of the day, that's where the rubber hits the road. So how does the case for Edge or 5G stack up? What are the kind of prerequisites in your mind for this to really scale?
Yeah, look, Natasha, as I said before, this is a journey, and 5G is not something that will be a bit of an echo. That will be rolled out overnight. It will be iterative as we are able to fulfill use cases over time. So the initial rollout of 5G for us is non-standalone. So it's largely focused on extending existing capability that we already have in the shape of 4G and some of the extensions that we've done to 4G and the use of fixed wireless access. So the monetization of that is reasonably well understood. That allows us to be able to run out and roll out essentially in a much broader context, a 5G RAN capability. Now, once we have a RAN capability that has a broad enough geographic spread, then we can obviously start to look at standalone and the use cases that require standalone, specifically MEC. And probably importantly, some of the capabilities that are out there that might require very low latencies. We've already started to do some work in looking at those, and as you mentioned before, America's Cup is coming up in New Zealand, and we have a partnership with them to be able to essentially trial some of the capability from a 5G perspective, to be able to get data much quickly directly off of the boats as they sail in the Hauraki Gulf and straight into the data analytics platforms to be able to understand and give direct feedback to the crew on the boat. That certainly hasn't been possible in the past. The capability just wasn't there, and the latencies involved made it impractical to be able to give real-time feedback back to the crews. So I think there's a certain amount of crystal ball gazing. The entire industry for the past few years has been trying to understand all of the use cases and what those use cases will look like. We're already starting to see in different parts of the world those use cases come to fruition. You're seeing in large manufacturing plants 5G being put in to be able to robotize those plants, to be able to make sure that you have much higher degrees of automation and orchestration within those plants. You're seeing in Australia, I know the mining industry, they're looking quite closely at the ability to use 5G in a standalone capability to be able to manage some of the very large plant that they use. I think the use cases are going to be probably a little bit more geographically specific than they have been for 4G. 4G has a lot more ubiquity about the way that it's being used than 5G will. I think in some countries there'll be quite easy ways to monetize some of the use cases, whereas in others it may not have the same level of applicability. So answering your question is difficult because there's always a certain amount of crystal ball gazing, but I think monetizing 5G is something that we already understand the extent to which we will be able to, and also the extent to which the capability will give huge amounts of potential, which is almost as limitless as the human brain's ability to be able to conceive of new ideas.
No, brilliant, and at least what that basically means is that players in the industry like you are confident that as we move along, we'll figure out how and where the monetization lies, and hence it will continue to evolve, and we'll go with it. So that's brilliant. But just as a quick follow-on, maybe a one-word answer. So how long do you think before we see 5G and edge to be applicable or available at scale when it becomes mainstay?
So it's a difficult one. I would think that we'll probably, certainly in New Zealand, it will probably lag some other parts of the world, purely and simply because some of the B2B use cases are not applicable here. But certainly in the 18 months to 2 year kind of timeline, I would see that at scale we'll have a number of use cases that are using 5G standalone, and we are also using MEC as part of that. We've already started to look at our MEC strategy in terms of which data centers we'll use, how we will make sure that we have a broad enough geographic spread so that we don't have latency concerns between the end consumer and those data centers. And that's a little bit of a different construct to the one that maybe we were looking at 5 years ago. We were much more centralizing. That now we're going back to distribution again, and that's purely and simply because MEC will drive that.
Great. Dustin, just quickly referring back to you, 18 to 24 months, does your research show you similar crystal balls?
Yeah, actually, it's spot on with that. It does. We've done a lot of surveying around the world. More or less, I think initially the first things are going to be the low-hanging fruit, the quick wins, the stuff that's going to give you immediate TCO ROI. But one thing, if I could comment on what I've heard thus far, I think there's a big focus, especially in telco, but across industry, in business outcome and business value. And we heard that with the windmill scenario. We're going to hear a lot more of that as we go forward. This is not just a TCO ROI conversation. This is a technology that's going to really enable transformation in ways we cannot imagine, to Campbell's point about the human brain and ideas.
Great. Gentlemen, you all have been awesome, and there's so much, and many questions have been pouring in. So I'll probably, pass this discussion on to Kalina very quickly. But before I do, I really thank you for those insights. I mean, this is truly, not just a discussion of a technology which is progressing or moving to generation 4 to generation 5, but a real transformation which is changing a lot of things around us. So thank you so much for sharing those views. We have a little time left for Q&A. So in this time, we would like to take the audience questions. Kalina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nitesh. Thank you very much, everyone. The first question for today is, what should be a standard edge deployment strategy for telcos globally? Is edge an enterprise or a retail opportunity?
Wow. Can I request Campbell to maybe take a shot at that?
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting. From the multitude of use cases that I've seen, I don't know that there will be one standard edge deployment. I think, going back to some of the comments that were made by Domenico, this will be massively disruptive, and I think there will be an ecosystem of players, but there will be not one standardized, but a multitude of different edge deployments that will have validity based on the use case. So yeah, it will be interesting to watch how the standards bodies manage this, because it really will come down to some use cases will be so specific to a particular organization and their needs and desires that being able to cater for that with a standardized set of templated ways of doing things may be problematic.
Thank you, Campbell.
Nitesh, if you allow
Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Yes, Domenico.
Yeah. Now, just to elaborate on this, because I think this is a key point. Of course, the telco today are 100% focused on 5G, the mobile operator. Right? But if you look at the edge computing per se, the point is really to have the right coverage of the territory and the right on the territory, right? And this is an asset of the telco already, right? A certain point, is a matter, as usual in business, you have to prioritize things. So now mobile operators are extremely 5G, but at a certain point they will realize that edge computing is opening up business opportunities that are connected to 5G. It is an area where the telco can leverage their presence on the territory, on the ground, right? So for me, it's a clear opportunity for the telco, right? And again, edge computing is coming with a number of use cases, even for edge computing related to low-latency applications, right? So I think it's in the interest of the telco industry to not leave this ground completely to hyperscale or to other competitors, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at the perspective of a consumer to have an 8K TV experience at home, or if you look at it from the perspective of a manufacturer who want to have strongly automized Industry 4.0 production plans, they have business problems to be issues. They want to have better access, etc. So they don't care if it is through 5G, if through edge. You know what I mean? So we need to look at the overall picture. We need to look at the solution that can improve way of people or can improve business efficiency of enterprises, and then I think that to realize that edge is for them as well.
Very true. Very true. Thank you. Kalina?
Thank you very much. Next question for today. What is the role of a system integrator in edge computing? How can an SI like Infosys differentiate from a hyperscaler partner, which can equally provide the integration support, professional services, and lifecycle management capabilities?
Well, certainly I'll request Anand to take that, and if need be, I'll add on to the answer.
Sure, Nitesh. I think a very interesting question that touches at the heart of our strategy at Infosys in terms of how we are looking at helping our customers in this space. The problem in this space, or the opportunity, starts with a business challenge. And a systems integrator like Infosys today operates across all these industries and has a deep understanding about the specific business challenges. And I spoke about the wind energy organization and their challenge. And given our proximity to the business problems, we have a deep appreciation for that challenge, which I think is the fundamental step in solving this by bringing the different elements in addressing the problem. So that's where, that's the role that I see for companies that are like Infosys in bringing together an ecosystem of players in addressing the problem. And also there was a question about, what's the, the architecture here. And as somebody pointed out, there are many ways in which this problem can be solved. There is not one single way in which it needs to be addressed because of data privacy concerns, because of security issues and latency and the right technology and so on and so forth. And when I talk about an ecosystem here, and we are talking about connectivity players, compute players, storage players, including players from the semiconductor space to bring in and solve the problem. So the role an Infosys plays is actually to be with the customer close enough to understand how they can bring the power of connectivity and compute and storage to solve the business problem. And that's where we think we have a role to play. But we can't solve this alone for sure. And that's where we need the support and partnership of hyperscalers as well as private cloud capabilities, as well as many telco operators and many other players in the ecosystem.
Absolutely, Anand. And if I may just add one more bit to it, when we look at the whole disaggregated ecosystem of the network of the future, it is a combination of running a software core, orchestrating it together with various cloud components and hardware components, putting a software RAN solution on it, and having virtual network functions being registered on it and operating. End of the day, this entire stack needs to deliver resilience and performance of 5.9 performance as is known in the telecom industry. And it requires one party to integrate it across and take that ownership. And that's also the additional role that system integrators are beginning to play, and especially integrators like Infosys, where we are taking that ownership and bringing it across. So we cannot do it alone. Like you rightly said, we need the partnership of all the players that play that role of providing the core, providing the RAN, providing the chipset, the compute, the storage, and the radios and all of those things. But binding all of it together in a manner that it delivers the performance is the job that system integrators like us are stepping up to. Kalina?
Thank you very much. Another question. What is holding mass acceptance and rollout?
That's an interesting one. What is holding mass acceptance and rollout? And if I may add just one more piece to it, and I'll throw the question to Campbell first. Is security one of those big concerns that keeps coming up again and again?
Yeah, look, security is always a concern. With everything that happens in this world today, security is a concern. It's the role of security teams and the ability for an organization, specifically telcos, to be able to understand their security posture and manage that over the past 10 years has grown exponentially. So, yeah, absolutely, security is a concern, but it's no more so a concern for this technology than any technology that we roll out. What's holding mass acceptance? I don't know that there is anything that's holding it back. I think if certainly for us in Spark, we are looking at how quickly we can put the capability in, how quickly we can make it ubiquitously available, and what are the things that we can supply to our customers that add value to the propositions that they have. So I don't really think there's anything holding it back other than people's imaginations of the ways that they can use the technology to the best effect.
Thank you very much. Okay, and last question for today's session. Why should a telco deploy edge capability while it may be possible to be deployed and accessed through partnership with HP, VMware, or other hyperscaler cloud providers?
I can take it, right, at least for HP, right? So I think is it's a very good question, and I think is the reason why, as a company, HP is fully into the consumption mode, because we believe that in these new type of businesses, consuming technology is the right way forward, rather than purchasing technology and using technology. Consuming technology give much more flexibility and give you the possibility to link, cost and revenue. And in this type of services, I think this is exactly the main concern of the telco today.
Thank you. Thanks, Domenico. I think we have time for just maybe one last question, if there is any.
All right, yes. One last question. Would Wi-Fi 6 be a viable alternative for those carriers who do not own any 5G or 4G spectrum, or should be driving the open RAN direction?
Well, Campbell, once again, over to you. You understand this area the best.
Sure. I think so. Wi-Fi 6, I think, has some very specifically different use cases. Specifically, the ability to use Wi-Fi 6 over a broad distance is very limited in terms of what you can do with it. It's an and, not an or, in my view. I think both technologies have their place and will absolutely end up helping to make sure that connectivity from a high performance for somebody who is mobile and moving around is ubiquitous.
Absolutely. Great. So with that, I think we have exhausted our time. We are just at the top of the hour. I would once again like to thank each one of you for taking your time and being part of the panel, sharing your insights and experiences with us. I'm sure for everyone who's attending, this has been as insightful as it has been for me, and as enjoyable too, because again, these variety of experiences from all across the world, from New Zealand, from Italy, from the US, and the benefit of the global research that we were able to get the insights from through global data, I think has been truly awesome. For all the participants too, I just want to extend my thanks for everyone to log in, and really appreciate you attending this webinar. Back to you, Kalina.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder for the audience, in order to ask any questions, you can still do that while watching the recorded version. Your questions will be available to be answered at a later date. So that just leaves me to thank Nitesh, Dustin, Domenico, Campbell, and Anand for what was a great presentation and a great discussion. And thank you to Infosys for sponsoring this session.